How's everybody doing? This is the Everything Baseball Network, or EBN, and I'm Steve Dallas, and I'm coming at you with part two. This is the 2021 fantasy draft first baseman section. We did the videos are up for National League. As I said, I'm going to break it down as follows: National League, then American League, and then mixed league, and that's for all the positions. And I started out obviously first base. My draft is not for another week, so I'm getting all my stuff out there. So the first two videos up there are a little different than this one, the way I set them up. This you're going to actually see my sheets that I use to study and that I make on the computer. But in the first two videos, I wanted you to learn a little bit about the game, and not so much the guys that have been playing for a while, but if there's any new players and they're getting information. So basically what's going to go down, first thing you got to do, if you're taking this serious, if you're just playing for fun, you don't care what happens, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to take it to the next level, you want to try to win, you get prestige as well as real money, then, I think if you tune in, you're going to see, because I've been pretty successful over the years. I've been doing this for a while, like 20 years. And one thing those videos show you is it breaks down the stats, and it tells you how you got to study. So I threw out there a way, I said you got to use like 3 years. Obviously, I showed you the setup. I went a fourth year because 2020 was only 60 game sample. So you can't really base that on everything. Some of the young players we can. Some of the older players, we can take some things away from that, and we're going to use that tonight. You're going to see. So let's jump in there. So the American League review. So, being from New York and a Yankee fan, this question comes up quite a bit here. Should Don Mattingly be in the Hall of Fame? And I always say this when someone calls in, and actually got in an argument with a host on one of the shows here. He said no. Obviously, he was a Met fan too, by the way. I'm not going to mention his name to embarrass him. But he didn't want to hear my argument. My argument is as such. If Kirby Puckett got in, right, and we look at the careers of both of these gentlemen, right, and obviously I'm biased. I'm a Yankee fan. Kirby played 12 years. Don played 14 years. If you look at, their stats and things that stand out, the average is 318 to 307. Kirby had 2,300 hits. I'm rounding up, or rounding down, and Don had 2,100 hits. But you can see they're in the same vein. Don had 442 doubles versus 414. Don had 222 home runs. Kirby 207. You can see where we're going. I'm not going to go through everything. So my point is, if Kirby Puckett is in the Hall of Fame, and we base it on his stats, and both had 3 dominating seasons, if you look over their career and change the case of the game, I guess, if you want to, say that, then I think Don should be in there. But anyway, that's just me, and again, I'm biased. We'll see what you say. But getting back to some of the stats we're going to use tonight. So I left these two out on the first ones because I didn't want to confuse you with a whole bunch of stuff. So, I made a little joke. I said they would, for my nerd friends or my computer friends, and some of the stats that I included in the first one, many of the younger players use, as well as some of my friends. WAR was one of them. I don't like WAR as a stat. I throw it out there because it's in all the books, and I explain it to you, so this way the new players know it. But you'll figure out what you want to use. Then we use, on base percentage and OPS, which is on base and slugging. So you came across those. Now, the two main ones that I personally rely on is your batting average with balls in play. This actually can show you trends. Some people say that it's based on luck. It's really not. There's a little more detail to that. We can also use this with pitchers, but batting average, balls in play is a measure of how often a base hit results when a batter puts a ball in play in fair territory other than by hitting a home run. For a pitcher, it is the cumulative average on balls in play achieved by all the batters the pitchers face. So really there's 3 parts to this: is defense, luck, and then talent. Talent goes for the defenders as well as the batter, because the batter also has to have some talent to put the ball in play, right? If it's somebody that's striking out 300 times a year, obviously that's not a good representation of it. But someone that is a good hitter, a professional hitter, you're going to see this correlates to his exit velocity, which we're going to get into next. And so the harder you hit a ball, right, the more chance you have of getting a base hit, because if you hit like a line drive, it's going to be low. They're not going to catch it. Or if you hit like a line drive, like right up the middle, you've all played baseball, it's going to fall in there for a single. So, that is a very important factor. Exit velocity again, can be used for batters as well as pitchers. And I rely heavily on exit velocity. This is a only for the past, I'd say, maybe 3 or 4 years, older. It's a newer stat that came out. And so what is bat exit velocity? The exit velocity measures your bat head speed as well as the efficiency and power of your swing mechanics. It is possible to have a ton of bat speed yet have a low exit velocity because you are not swinging with the proper swing mechanics. And then also the exit velocity stat, how to use an advantage in Major League Baseball handicapping. So handicapping Major League Baseball pitching is crucial to your bankroll, right? Which is true, right? Because that's where you can spend a lot of money. We talked about this in the first video where I said, one pitcher I do mostly auctions now. I don't really do rotisserie. There's nothing wrong with it. I just find the head-to-head more exciting and more realistic. So, you have to try to figure out, just like in real baseball, you got to keep your costs down because you have a salary cap. So you got to live by that salary cap. And this is one of the measures that actually helps us. And when we get to the pitchers, we'll go into more detail with that. But this is a great article. So basically, it's exit velocity, hitter studs, and duds heading into 2020. So many fantasy baseball owners are starting to see the value of MLB's StatCast advanced stats in order to help identify potential risers and sleepers. Just as we do for pitchers, this weekly series will examine a handful of hitters who are performing surprisingly well. So go check out that article. It'll tell you more. Again, these are my personal slides now you're going to see. The first was I just threw them together to show you how, I input stuff because, like I said, I look at the books and I look at stuff online, but I make up my own study sheets because I like things in a certain order and the way I study, the way I remember things. And I'm sure, I know a few people in my leagues that are as detailed as I am. So, and I'm sure some of you do it. You may not realize you do it. You may not do it on the computer. You may just, make notes. So before we actually jump into the breakdown that you're waiting for tonight, I came across this article by Verducci, and it was a really good article because he said first base, overrated, or are there any good ones left? So the whole article is about talking about the elite first baseman, what happened to them. Because it's really, when you look at it, when we do the mixed league and we do everything, there's probably only 10 really, really good, first base hitters. Most of the athletic positions, shortstop, center field have, some of the better hitters. So the first baseman, it's not like when I was younger. And like I said, the way we described, I described how I look at a first baseman. It's kind of like Jack Clark in my time. You want that big, powerful guy at first base. Now, we got spoiled when you had Goldschmidt. We had some of the guys like that. We had Teixeira hit for average. You had a bunch of guys, that played the over there at first and really added another dimension. Goldschmidt, or Goldie, as I like to call him, added stolen bases. So there's a lot of things that have changed. Now, in this new generation, and I played baseball and watching baseball, it's all or nothing now. If you look, everybody has a strikeout. If you actually have a strikeout ratio, walks to strikeouts of 2-to-1, you're actually a pretty good hitter. It's when you start to get to like more than that or 3 times to 1, those are the bad hitters now. But pretty much everybody strikes out twice as much. And that didn't happen when I played ball. If you struck out that much, you sat on the bench. You got to put the ball in play. You got to move the runners along. The game was a different game than it is now. Now we just wait for the home runs. So now this is what you all been waiting for. Let's get in there. So what I did was, these are my notes. I'm going to make myself a little smaller here just so you can see everything. So when I make my study sheets, I come up with a depth chart 6 deep for every position. Now, you may not fill for every team all those positions, and basically the way you got to do that is you got to look at the 40-man roster, you got to look at all the prospects, you got to look at all the free agents that were signed, you got to look at all the people that were invited, and then you got to try to piece this together and figure it out. Now, I make this a little earlier, and you're going to see some of these guys are on the fringe. They're not going to make it. Some were sent down already. So, but pretty much you got to know who's there. This is good to keep for the whole season. And what I'll do is after, I'll actually put a copy up. After I put the video up in the links, I'll actually put a copy to it as well as the tier section, so you can actually print them and bring it to your draft. And I'll explain the color codes in a second. So basically, again, this is how I do it. And I keep this because as the season unfolds, and I play in a few different leagues, so you got to know what's going on. And, if somebody gets hurt, I want to know who's out there. Now, again, if you're playing rotisserie baseball, it's a little different than the way I'm gearing this towards more the head-to-head guys. rotisserie is pretty easy. You can't really, mess up. You're just compiling stats. I guess you could mess up if you don't do your homework, but you really got to go best talent in the beginning. And, pretty much depending if there's only 12 guys in your league, you're going to have plenty of players out there to pick up, unless you're doing like American League only, National League only, or if you have more players. But a league I was in only had 12, so pretty much you had like an all-star lineup, and it's just basically stat compiling. Whereas with this, not only do you have to know the charts for in case somebody gets hurt, but you also may want to reach in there. Part of winning is like real baseball, and with the waiver wire, you may see somebody that didn't get drafted on the waiver. I'm just throwing a name out there because he hits a lot of home runs. Dietrich, right? Derek Dietrich used to be with Miami, right? Now trying out for the Yankees. It looks like he's not going to make the major club, but he's probably going to stay with them, maybe get sent down. We'll see what happens with that. But, so, he could hit 20 home runs. He hit poor for average, but, he's capable of carrying a team for a week. He's gotten hot where he's hit 5 or 6 home runs in a week. So part of a head-to-head thing is, you do get injuries, but also, if you're falling behind or you're lagging in one category, you can go out and pick up somebody and try things for a week, just like real baseball. So it's important to see this throughout the year and to update it throughout the year. So I know some guys do it just once and then they'll, scribble in things, but I actually study throughout the year, and that's why this channel is going to keep going throughout the year. So we'll kind of update this as we go along. So, when we look at this though, again, before you can even get into any draft, you got to know a few things. You can't just show up on draft day, especially if it's head to head, and let's say like I'm in a national league and one in a mix than the other. You got to know who's been traded. You got to know who's been signed. Otherwise, you're going to make a fool of yourself, basically. And also, you have to know who's the starters, who's been hurt, what's going on going into the season. Because nothing is as it says in those books, all right? Once the season comes closer or once your draft comes closer. Both of my drafts, we draft late because what happens is we do have keepers and we draft to the last minute. In one league, we actually draft a few games into the season, and then the stats just count when we throw the lineup together for that first week. Because, like I said, with a keeper league, we want to make sure if somebody gets hurt, you're not going to get stuck with a player. So that's actually really nice that our commissioner does that. Not all leagues do that. Some do it a lot earlier, but both of my leagues actually start late. So, basically it gives you an advantage in the sense that if, let's say, you were going to keep somebody and they broke their leg and they're going to be out the whole season, well, now you can get rid of him and you don't have to eat that salary. So, because we've had that in the past where things like that have happened, and, so we kind of voted. We changed the rules periodically, and that's one rule, that we have. Again, know your rules. You may not know that, right? So, know your rules. That's the most important thing. And then you have to know what players are on what team and who the starters are. So, in Baltimore, Chris Davis just hurt his back, and I don't know if he was going to play anyway, but he's not the starting first baseman. He's probably going to start the year in a 60-day DL. All right, so he's number 3 with a red, and I was just generous because, you're stuck with his contract, so I put him on the sheet. And then Mountcastle, according to all the books, is probably the early favorite to be the first baseman, but he's not. He hasn't played first base all spring. He's been playing left field and right field, and Mancini's been playing first base, and there's a reason why, and we're going to go into all that. So you probably don't know that. And, if you haven't been paying attention or been paying attention, in our experience, you might not know really what's going on in Baltimore. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So I have Mancini in red, not because that's bad. Usually red's a bad thing. We're going to go into more detail, but that's like a flag that he's actually the starter at first base. Actually, this week he started 3 out of 5 games at first base, and Velaka started the other 2. So he's definitely the first baseman. There's a reason why he's in red. We're going to go into that in a second. Then in Boston, it looks like, Dalbec and Chavez, were battling it out to see who was going to get the starting first base job. And it looks like Chavez is going to probably make the roster. It's going to go down to the last day because we're going to talk about it when we get into the nitty-gritty, who he's battling with. But Dalbec looks like he's going to have the nod. Then, of course, nobody's going to supplant Abreu yet. But you also have to know, number 3 there on the White Sox, they drafted Andrew Vaughn, who has a future, and Abreu is still there for 2 more years. So that kid might be ready, and he might be the future. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Then in Cleveland, Bowers is out of options. Bradley has options. Bradley is the better player, right? But Francona likes Bowers. Bowers they traded for him. They traded Yandy Diaz back down there at Tampa Bay for Bowers. So they gave up quite a bit for him. and they're going to keep him. They're gonna play him and see what happens. They're going forward with it. So Bradley is probably going to get sent down to start the season, and then he'll be back later. So that's why Bradley's in red. It's not a bad thing. He's actually a very good guy. I have him low in my draft and in my tiers because of the fact that he's not going to start, and we'll go into all that in a few minutes. And then in Detroit, I got Candelario, and Cabrera in blue because they're starting. And Nunez is in yellow because he's probably going to get the nod at first base more times than the other two. And I'm going to explain more of that in a second, too. So, all three are going to play. The nice thing with the American League, they have the DH. The nice thing I noticed when putting this together over the years past, you're starting to see, and it's more, the American League is becoming more versatile because I guess they have like dinosaurs that can't play multiple positions that take up the DH spot, and that's a spot on your roster. So, that's one guy down. Most, even though it went to 26, most teams are carrying 12 to 14 pitchers, right? So the game has changed quite a bit. So what's happening is versatility. And if you notice, they want players that can play multiple positions. And putting this together, I noticed that the American League has more of those type of younger players that can play 3 or 4 positions. So a lot of these guys on the sheet that went 6 deep, they may not necessarily be the starting first baseman, but they're going to DH, or they might play third base, or they might play the outfield, but they qualify based on the rules from either 2020 or 2019, depending on how your commission is going to do it. Because of the short season, we're going back to 2019 in our league, so most of these guys are set up for that when I have the positions. So what's going to happen is you may have missed a first baseman, but then all of a sudden you come to DJ LeMahieu, also has first base ability, and let's say you missed the big guys, and then you go get him, and that's actually one of my plans in one of my league, and you're going to see in the tiers I have LeMahieu in the top 10 because that's a particular way I'm gearing that team up for. I want to go power, but I want to go different type of team, contact team. So I'm going to try something different with that league. And, these are things you can think about as things unfold. Then in Houston, you got Gurriel. He's there. I think he's there for another 2 years. They just signed him 2 or 3 year extension. I forget what it was. You 1 year of that. And then they got some good guys there that are rookies and stuff. We'll go into that. Then Kansas City brought in Santana. So he's there for 2 years. Santana, you should know, if you go back 2020 and 2019, he does not qualify as a catcher anymore. So, a lot of guys would draft him, not necessarily as a starting first baseman or as a starting catcher, but you can't do that anymore with him, until he, plays, your league rules. Some leagues have 10, we have 20. So if they get him and they play when he gets 20 games, then he'll officially be a catcher, and I could slot him into a catcher. Your league might be different. That's why you got to know your rules. Pujols is a mainstay there. They're paying him. He ain't going anywhere. And his numbers declined. We're going to go into that. He's still got value. Okay, we'll talk about that. But Jared Walsh looks like he's going to, he's between the two of them, and Walsh can play the outfield, first base, as well as, he pitches too, just so you guys know. He is a reliever too. So I don't know how much they're going to use him in, pitching. He did pitch a few games last year. But additionally, between sharing the DH, sharing first base, and letting him play outfield, Walsh had a really good year last year towards the end. Theis was just sent down. Theis is a great player because he plays like 4 positions. We're going to keep an eye on him because he's going to come back. Now, going into Minnesota, Sano actually plays third, and then they shifted him over to first. And then they had Kirilloff. So most of the magazines, said he was going to be the number 1 guy, but he's actually having a really poor spring. And Sano, we're going to go into more detail with him. Now, in New York, I put Bruce in blue only because he's probably going to make the team. They're really high on him. I don't know why. I don't see the benefit, even in reality, not so much, fantasy. But I just don't think he's a good fit for them. And we're going to go into a little bit more later about that. But, I have him there in blue because if you take Voit, right, it looks like they're going to rest him a little bit if they got Bruce, against, Bruce's lefty. So they're going to probably cut some of his at-bats there, whereas we thought he was on the upswing with 22 home runs last year. You're thinking he's going to break out with 40 home runs maybe this year, and then all of a sudden they bring in Bruce. So if they keep Bruce, he's going to take some at-bats away from Voit. So just keep that in mind. I'm not saying not to draft Voit. I'm just saying that, you're probably looking at like 30 home runs instead of 40 if you were coming into the year, Now, Oakland, you got Olsen. He looks like he's healthy and he's back, and he's going to go high. It's going to be expensive. He's like one of my favorite ones this year, and we're going to go into that. And then Moreland is, he's there. He's old. He's probably going to make the team, off the bench, but, I wouldn't really mess with him. And then Kanha, he actually qualifies for first, but he's also an outfielder, but he's got 20-plus power, which we're going to go into. Now, Seattle, they love Evan White in Seattle. And he's having, I got him in pink there because he is the starter, even though he's doing bad. They got Marmoleos and France. I think France might be a little hurt. We're going to go into that in a second. So he's going to get the nod to start. So just be careful with that, though, because there's actually 3 guys that can play first, and those other 2 guys are hitting really good in the spring. We're going to delve into the numbers in a second before I throw out the tiers. Then G-Man Choi got hurt. He actually got a shot in his knee today, a cortisone, so he's not going to be ready for opening day, so that's why he's in red. It's nothing bad. He actually was a good power guy, so it looks like they're going to go with Brosur, and Yandy Diaz, actually pretty good. And then I read today that Zutsugo, the third baseman from Japan, they got him, playing third base, and I think he got, first base, and he got his first game over there. So he's going to start the season probably, not qualified for first, but if he gets 20 games or 10 games, depending on your league, you're going to get the nod. Then you got Kelly is a pretty good prospect. We're going to talk about that. And then in Texas, I got Nate Lowe. I don't like Nate Lowe. And I think Nate Lowe is actually Ronald Guzman. And they both bat lefty. They thought Lowe was going to win the job, and he probably is, but Guzman's having a little better spring, and there's more things we're going to talk about that Guzman did this offseason that I think Guzman's experience, I would go, if they're both there and they both make the roster, be careful because they're both lefty. One of them's actually going to probably win the job. Guzman's been experimenting with the outfield. He doesn't qualify for the outfield yet, but he will because they have been playing him in the outfield. And then you got Eli White. All of a sudden, 2 days ago, he's a righty, and he plays the outfield, and the manager said, you know what, Eli, come on, get a first baseman and go play first base. And he played his first game at first base. So I guess he had played first base in the minors, but a while ago. And so now that's pretty interesting because you got the 2 guys that were battling it out, and then spring training's almost over, and they tell White, a righty, to go, so I'm thinking they're going to platoon over there. So I would just stay away from Texas, to be honest with you, unless I had to take one of their first basemen, because that's going to play out into the season. So, you got Guerrero, he got hurt in 2018. He hurt his knee. I think he had surgery. They moved him from third base to first base. They thought he wouldn't get hurt. And Guerrero's Guerrero. He's not a great defensive first baseman, just like he wasn't a great defensive third baseman. But the thing with him is, he told them this year he wants to play third. So they got him, if you looked at the, every other day, one day he's at third, one day he's at first. It can only enhance his value to you because he's going to have, first base and third base, as well as it gives them a chance to play Tellez. So that's an interesting spot there. I think Tellez and Guerrero are going to get their at-bats, and they're both very good hitters. They're both like the same age. We're going to go into all of that in a second, and then we're going to break down all those positions. So, things to know while breaking down first base, and this is based on 2019. So very important because I do use exit velocity, and I think if you didn't use it, you're going to start using it as I show you some things. The average, all right, in 2019, I'm not really basing it on last year, because a couple of reasons, but it's 88.7 miles per hour. That's when they hit the ball, how fast it is. Now, we know the closer you are to 100 miles an hour, those guys usually are the better hitters. And if somebody actually goes up or gets closer to 100 miles an hour, because sometimes there are balls hit that are over 100 miles an hour, that's actually the average, the 88.7. But the closer you are to 100, the more hits you're going to get, the more power you're going to have, and the better the season you're going to have. That's been proven. Okay. Also, we can correlate that if you have, just like the pitcher loses velocity on his fastball, he may not have a good season. If you lose some of your bat speed or your exit velocity, then therefore you might, be off a little. Now I say might because there are some players that didn't really have a lot of bat speed, and you just, that may be lower than the average, and they put up great seasons. So yes, it's a stat. It's not 100%. You also got to use your eyes, you got to use your mind, and you got to use your feel. But it's a pretty good stat now. I rely on that more than like a WAR or anything like that. So I'm really into that stat, and we can see some things. Now, I say I wouldn't base it on 2020. It's really interesting, and somebody should actually write an article or do a study about this. pretty much across the board, all the guys that had their velocity kept track over, with a track record, had a decrease of about a mile per hour going into last year, and that's pretty much all the players. And you're going to see, because I actually have it broken down on every slide coming up. So was it the way they played? Was it that they didn't play enough games? They didn't do as much work as they normally do in a season? Was it because the season was delayed? Who knows? But there's got to be a reason why it was down across the board. That's why we're not using it. So because that 60 games sample, we're kind of like throwing it out. We are going to use it for some players, and I'll explain why, how, and it's just an extra thing you can help make a credible judgment on a pick that you're going to make. And then, the next thing we should look at is on base percentage. The average was 322 for the major leagues in 2019. Then the average ops was 758. The average ball in plays was 298. And then ops, just remember this, there was a whole, in the first video, you can watch it on how to do it, but pretty much if it's less than 700, you're below average. You're not a good player. If you're 7 to 766, you're average. Anything above 766, or just, round down, if you're looking at numbers, if you see 750, that's a pretty good one, And then the WAR, just remember, less than 2 is bad, 2 or 3 is solid, 3 or 4 is good, 4+ is an all-star. When I do look at WAR, and I don't look at it that much, I just go with the number 2. I know anything 2 or above is pretty good. And then, in 2019, there were 83 first basemen in the league, and this was their averages. So if you take, everything, all the numbers, if you home runs, you divide everything by 83, this is what you get. So if you had an average first baseman, they played 92 games, they had almost 300 at-bats, they had 75 hits, they hit about 251, they had 14 homers, they hit 45 RBIs, they had 42 runs, they had 2 stolen bases, and so forth. You can read all the numbers. Okay, so what does that tell you? You're going to be surprised. A lot of the players are around those numbers. They might be 10 off either way in the batting average, but a lot of players are between 14 and 20 home runs. You're going to see those numbers actually play out to most first basemen. Now, I'm not talking about Abreu, right, that has a track record, but a lot of the younger, newer ones, these are the numbers they put up. And you're going to say I'm crazy. I've been doing this a long time. And I come up with these numbers. And that's how I come up with I make my own projections. And then I see how close I'm going to be at the end of the year. Now, obviously, there's always somebody that either, blows it away or messes up, So, it's not perfect. Again, here at my channel, Everything Baseball Network, EBN, we do have a sponsor. We're sponsored by 3D Sports Cards. You can check them out. They're online. It's an eBay business. They have 100% rating, and they sell a lot of graded cards. I buy a lot of baseball cards from them, so go check them out. It's a good company, and they do sponsor us. So now let's jump right in there. So Baltimore, right? They have 6 people on the depth chart, right? So if we look at the depth chart, you're going to say, this is my notes. This is how I study. I bring this with me to the draft. It's actually in a book, and this is how I make my stuff. Okay, these are the stats I'm looking at. You can see it's much less columns than I showed you in those first 2 videos. I'm just going to take a sip of my coffee here. Old man news, another channel. So anyway, with this breakdown, in red is average home runs, RBIs, runs, and stolen bases. That's in red, and it's boxed on every slide because that's the money. That's what you're getting points for. Now, the rest of the stats help you determine if the player is going to have same year as last year, if he's going to regress, or if he's going to break out. So some of the things I told you that we're going to look for is age. Very important factor is age, size of the player, depending on if he's a power hitter or not, stuff like that you want to look at, as well as EV. EV is exit velocity. I rely heavily on that. Some of them, in the earlier slides, I started putting the WAR up. I was really doing that for you guys, then I kind of just stopped because I don't really look at the WAR. So if we break down Baltimore, as I told you, Davis has added a pitcher for a while. I think what's going to happen with Davis is, he's going to probably have back surgery. This is what I'm thinking. And they're probably going to get insurance or buy him out. He's got 3 more years left, or 2 more after this year. So I think that, he sees the writing on the wall that they've kind of passed him by. And I think, at this point, he probably just wants to get out. He's not going to give money back. And some people say, oh, he should just give the money back. Well, let me tell you, this is America, man. We're free. And if you're going to get millions of dollars, $162 million, you give it to me. I ain't giving it back to you. I'll go there and give 100%. If my 100% is hitting 216, well, that's it. That you paid for that. So, anybody that says he should give the money back and go is just foolish, because nobody would give the money back if they had it. So Mancini is going to be the starting first baseman. If you've been following the lineups, he's in first base. Mountcastle, he's going to qualify as a first baseman, but they've been playing him in the outfield. So they're going to get both of those bats in there. They like both of those bats. Now, an interesting thing about Mancini. Me personally, I always flag players. And like for me, G-Man Choi, whatever his name is, I wouldn't go after him anyway. I don't like his numbers. I don't like his makeup. I don't think he's a very good player personally. But let's say that's the guy I wanted. Well, his knee flared up and he got a cortisone shot. So that would be a red flag because anybody that's had a knee injury knows, or anybody that played baseball, that could be a nagging injury that could persist quite a while and eventually wind up having surgery. So that's a bad pick. All right. You're going to invest money, capital, and time and a roster spot on that. And so in my mind, just stay away from him. You could find somebody else that'll give you 20 home runs and bat 260. Okay. If he bats 260. So my point with Mancini is a great player, but I would totally stay away from him this year. I'm going to tell you why. So last year, he missed the whole year. He was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer. So, he had chemo and he had surgery. He missed all of 2020. And, he's back. But keep him in your prayers, right? Because we don't, young man, we don't want to see anything bad happen to anybody, right? But is that lingering? Will that flare up again? Will that affect the way he's been playing? He missed a whole year. Now he's been hot in spring training, and I have the plus SPG, means he's been having a hot spring training. So it doesn't look like there's any lingering effects, but that's short term. What happens when he gets to 40 games? Will he get tired? Who knows? So, and then, like I said, will that cancer come back and he'll miss time? I don't know. And hopefully not. We'll keep him in our prayers. But that's something that, hey, if you're going to invest time and money in somebody, I think I would pass up on that. Or maybe not so much pass up on him as a starter, but maybe grab him as a bench player if he's there. I don't think he's going to be there. I think somebody's going to grab him and take a chance. I just wouldn't want to be the guy holding the bag if he misses half the season, let's say, and you invested in him as your starting first baseman. Now, he is in that window of 25 to 30, so he was breaking out. I put up the stats there. If we look at, 2 years ago, before he was hurt, he had 35 homers, hit 97 RBIs, 106 runs, 291. And if you look at his exit velocity, it was 90.8, and it's been going up. If you look at the trend of his numbers, and the one on the bottom is his average. His career average is 90.1. So we know that he already has higher velocity than 88.7. So that's a great bat. So I would invest in the bat, but then the flag comes because of the cancer stuff. I just don't know. Now, you could take a chance. I have him lower in my tiers because of that, and I'm showing you how I think and how you should think. Because, if you're playing the game to win, and these things have worked for me, yeah, I might miss out on a player because I look at it that way, but I may also have missed a heartache, Do you want to be the guy that has the player that, has the first monster first half and then doesn't play anymore the second half, So I don't know. Just keep an eye on that. Everybody's different. You may feel differently in the game. You might take him. Okay, so if we look at his projected things, I think he's gonna. He's got the chance. His career, numbers. If we look at the fact that he missed the season, I downgraded his numbers a little bit, and some of the books had higher numbers than that, and I've been pretty good with my judgment. Now, I'm going to say 270, 25, 73, 78. Now, you may say, you're crazy. He's going to have 100 RBI. Whatever. That's fine. I just see the red flags. You may not. Then we have Velaka. I'm not saying to take him as a starter. I put him on there because he's a great bench player because he could play 3 positions in yellow, and then he's probably going to be qualified for the other 2. So as a role player, 230, 14 home runs, 39, 50. Again, head-to-head, you might need those players to go to, especially at a week at a time. So he's just somebody to keep in mind off the, on the waiver wire, not to draft him. Then we got Davis. You could see he's a mess. His 90.7 is his career exit velocity. It was down last year, 89.2. 85.2. I'm sorry, last year, that was 2019. It was 89.2. So you could see it dropped 4 miles per hour. And now he's got a back problem. So that's just a mess. Stay away from that. And then you have Mountcastle. Like I said, Mountcastle is low on the depth chart only because he's not going to be a first baseman. Yes, he can play first baseman. Yes, he's going to probably spell Mancini, and they're going to put him there. But it looks like they're going Mancini at first. Mountcastle, he's younger. His legs are healthier. Mancini, chemo, a little bit older. So I think they're going to save his legs and keep him at first. That's why I think they did that. Small sample size, right? He had 333, 523 last year. Interestingly enough, again, he had great numbers in the minors, right? If we look 280s, 20 plus, they had 87.4 for exit velocity. I'm not sure I'm buying that. I just threw it up there. That's a stat. It was a short season, so just be aware that, he's under the, if we go by that, they did measure it last year. That's the only one they measured because it only goes in the major leagues. They keep track of it. That could be a red flag. So that's why I got that in red. I'm not saying that. I would go for him at 24, up-and-coming player. I think if everything fires right for him, right, and they take the pressure off him, put him in the outfield, and they bring him along slowly like that, and I think you're looking at 275, 25, 80, and 78 with 3 stolen bases. Now, he might be a little bit off that, but pretty much I am a little higher than some of the books because I looked at it. I broke down in his minor leagues. He's got the track record, so I think the numbers are going to be there for him, and he's doing pretty good this spring. So he's got 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, 250. So his minor league average is probably like 265. So I think he's there to prove something. He's a young guy. I think the first year you take the pitchers by surprise because that was a short season last year. So I think you can expect good things from him. And then we got Tyler Nevin. Just be aware of him. He's 6'4". He's a big guy, 225. Plays first, third in the outfield. In 130 games at Double-A last year, he had 13 homers. He's just somebody to keep in mind for the future. In my league, we have 3 future spots. So basically, what happens is you can in a draft you can buy a rookie. Most of us don't. We take them at the end of the draft. What happens is the last 5. We have a snake draft, and that's when usually the rookies go. But let's say when Bryce Harper was coming up, I actually bid on Bryce Harper, when they weren't, right in the first draft. It took everybody by surprise, and I got him for like $8. So that was way back when. So sometimes we do buy guys, and the way our league works, and like I said, you got to know your rules. Those 3 spots, so we got 5-man bench, and then we got 3 spots for minor leaguers. If you're in the minor league, you're allowed to stay on that 3. If for some reason they got put in the major leagues, and you don't want them anymore, you either got to cut them or you got to drop somebody if you want to keep them and put them on your spot. So it's, you only get 3, so you can't really mess that up. You can't really what I do is I carry guys that I'm going to trade. The guys that usually those 3, I try to get them in the snake draft, are guys that are going to come up. Like, for instance, Bobby Bradley. He's not going to be there in the snake draft. Somebody's going to pay for him in your league. But let's say he fell into the end of the snake draft for those extra guys. So what would happen is if you grabbed him, you'd put him on there, and he's going to come up eventually. And then what would happen is you'd check him out, see how he's doing, and then you can use him as trade bait, to see, how you're doing, and so forth. But, then you can also, let's say you can't miss, some of these pitchers they know, but they want them to get seasoned, and they're throwing 100 miles an hour. Maybe one of those guys you want to keep, and then you can carry them over for the whole year. So you'd get them for that first year really with $1. It counts as $1 towards your cap. And then the next year, you'd have to pay, $5. So it jumps to 5 for those players. And then, that's my rules. Your rules might be different. Again, I'm going into more detail, more for the head-to-head guys. If you're a rotisserie, a lot of this stuff, you could just get the tiers and you can move on because you're pretty much easy and you're doing a snake draft. So it's really, you're going to go for, depending on how you're building your team, you're going to try to go, if you're doing a rotisserie, you want to do the best available, just like football drafts, But this is a little different. You're actually building your team here. And most of us that play this are in competitive leagues that have anywhere from 10 to 12 teams. And, there's 15 teams, per league. So that means there's not a lot of players left at waiver wire time. You really got to know what you're doing. And like in my league, having those, like for instance, Reese Hoskins. I carried Reese Hoskins for a year because they wasn't sure if they were bringing him up. The first time I carried him, he had a small September call-up. But then the next year he started in the minors. Then he came up. Excuse me. And when he came up, then my team was good. I was making a playoff push, and I needed a pitcher, and I actually used him as trade bait. So, but those are ways, you got to think of everything to build your team. So if we go into the first baseman for the Red Sox, they're 6 deep. Now, I got Dalbec in yellow because it looks like he's going to get the nod over Chavez. It looks like Chavez is having a great, I was going to say great spring in the sense that he's hitting 5 home runs and 19, RBIs. His average was a little down. So I said poor 20. Oh, it's a 2020. I'm sorry. Usually I put the spring there. What did I put his spring? Because he was having a. Oh, he's hitting 308 with 6 homers and 11 RBIs. I knew he was having a really good spring with the home runs. So he's forcing their hand. They were going to kind of jettison him, but I think he's forcing their hand, and they're going to have to keep him on the roster. And it's really actually a good pick for you, because even if they say they're going to start Dalbec, keep Chavez in mind for later rounds, because he does play first, outfield, second base, and third base. And it's always great to have versatile players, especially if somebody gets hurt. And I give Chavez the nod over Dalbec because this is how I look at it. Their numbers are almost identical. The scouts say that Dalbec's a little better. If you look at their exit velocity, he's slightly better. And I think that's what they give him in his swing. I think they actually perceive that, he swings a little better when you break down a swing. So again, you got to look at video. You got to look at interviews. You got to see what the scouts say about these guys. So their numbers are virtually the same. They both strike out quite a bit. And so you're trading one guy for another that's almost the same. Both righties, both play multiple positions. They don't really give you a lot of speed. And if they're identical, why would you jettison Chavez? Chavez has already been there and, had his time in there. And I think he's more ready for the show now. So I would say that, going through the growing pains and almost losing his job, look at the spring he's having, right? And again, we're not really relying on spring numbers, but if somebody's motivated to make a team, sometimes that carries over into the season. So I think with Chavez, I'm not saying like it's going to carry over and he's going to, be an all-star. Although with all these first basemen, if he does the projected 265, 18, 65, 55, and 5, he might be, depending. Because a lot of them are in the same projected, stratosphere. So Chavez, I give the nod over Dalbec. I think eventually Chavez is going to supplant Dalbec because Dalbec, to me, seems like he strikes out a lot. Now, he's also raking in the spring. He's hitting 324 with 6 home runs and 16 RBIs. He has the job. He's 20 plus in the minors. The other guy's 20 plus power in the minors, right? But his walk ratio, K to walk ratio, is actually a little bit worse. And then I read this article where they did about contact. I should have put the article in here, but I don't know what. If you Google it, they were talking about the worst contact first basemen, from last year, and Dalbec was number 1 from last year. Now he hit 263 with 8 home runs and 16 RBIs. You could see 89.9 miles per hour. Everything else looks pretty good. His, batting average of balls in play is above average. So you would say, wow, and he struck out 39 times out of 10, but they also looked at, swings and misses, and he had like the most swings and misses out of any batter. So now, again, he's a little bit behind Chavez. Does that mean he's going to have a bad year? No. I just think it's going to take him a little longer to grow, and you could see his numbers are slightly better in the sense he's going to, I have him down for more homers and more RBIs, but I think his batting average is going to be a little lower. So watch Chavez. I think that's definitely something to look at there. And then Okimi, I don't know how to say his name. Basically, you can see his average was horrible, AAA last year, but he did have 25 homers. He's not a guy for now. He's hitting 308 with 1 homer and 5. He's really, there's better prospects than him, but he is a prospect, in case you are looking at prospects. And I have, at first base, if you look down on the bottom where it says first base, if you follow the line on lacrosse, those are his total minor league stats. So he's got some power in the minors. And, 239 average, though. But, keep an eye on him. Then you got Marwin Gonzalez. He plays multiple positions, major leaguer, 264, 15. That was probably his best year, last year. And look at his exit velocity was 91.3. So, Marwin's always going to be there. He's having a decent spring. Good bench player. He's not really a first baseman, but just keep in mind that he is there. And then if we jump in here, what do you do with Chavez? And here's the things I was telling you about. So it says Chavez is pushing for a roster spot, right? And he's not in consideration for the outfield because he is outfield qualified. And then today, Chavez has major league options. So, if we go back here for a second, if Chavez has the options and Dalbec doesn't, or somebody else doesn't on the roster, they may start him out in the minor leagues. And then you may say, well, you said he was going to come up. Well, think about it. If he's been doing great in the spring and then you send him down, he's going to be pissed off. He's going to be out to prove something, and he lost his job. And if the other guy struggles and he comes back, you're going to see a different player. I'm telling you to watch Chavez. I think there's something there. Good, positive thing. And then, they also have Renfroe, who, you may remember from the San Diego days. Big guy, strikes out a lot, but hits a lot of home runs. But he is first base qualified, and I bet you a lot of people will forget about him, because I almost forgot about him as first base. But he is outfield and first base. So if you miss out on the first basemen, and especially if you're doing not a snake draft head-to-head, and you're just not in there, you lose out on the big guys and you go in a different direction, and then later you're like, oh man, I need a first baseman. If he's still there, he qualifies for the outfield and first base, and you got 30 home runs with him, right? The average, I got him a little generous, 230, 30, but last year he hit 156 in the shortened season, and then he hit 216 and the year before that, but he had 33 homers. But then the interesting thing is his average exit velocity is 90, right? In 2019, he was 90.8. Last year, again, like I was telling you guys, he was down a mile per hour, just like every other major leaguer. So I think he's still going to be a 90. He's still way above the average. Hits a lot of home runs. You can't teach power. He's at that point. He's at 29. He's still in those golden age. So, I'm not saying all of a sudden he's going to come out and hit 280. But you know what? Maybe he hits 30 home runs and drives in 100 RBIs. That team's not really good. Maybe he bats fourth, and you never know. So that's kind of like a sleeper pick in the sense that, they may forget that he plays first base. So I don't mean sleeper, he's going to be great, but sleeper that in case you mess up, Renfroe's there. Now, Tristan Casas. Keep an eye on this kid. He plays first and third. He only had 1 year at A-ball, but he hit 256 with 20 home runs. And they're talking high. He was drafted high. So, put him on your list of dynasty players, and keep an eye on him throughout the season, see where he's at. Because if Chavez and Dalbec, falter, maybe that kid comes in, Now we go to the White Sox, who are pretty much solidified at first base. Abreu's going to be there. They may rest him a little here or there. And then, they have Sheets right now as the backup first baseman, and then they have Andrew Vaughn. So interesting enough, though, just if we look at the exit velocity, his career average is 91.7. In 2019, he was 92.8. In 2020, he was 92.9. So he did go up a little, even though it's 0.1. So he's on the uptick, even though he's 34 years old. So again, we could use some of that to gauge where they're at. And he's coming off 19 homers, 317 in the shortened season. Year before, he had a monster season, right? He was the MVP last year, right? In the short season. So, he's probably the number one. I think my board, I have him as the number one for the AL. So he's either taken already and you're not going to get him, or you're going to pay for him. Another thing I wanted to tell you, I should have told you in the books, if you look at the books for head-to-head drafts, they give you dollar values. Those values never work out unless it's at the end of the draft, because everybody's going to go for more in your drafts. Like most of these players, they'll be like 20 and I don't know how they come up with their numbers. And then I've seen like the same guys go for 40 in my league or my drafts. So again, that's a head-to-head. It's more selective, and I'm sure it's the same in your draft. So just, those numbers, don't really pay attention to those. But I just want to point that again. Andrew Vaughn, right? He had a great college career, 55 homers, third overall pick in 2019. He only played 1 year in the minors. They're talking about him on the roster now. So imagine that. They may know really only 1 year. They're talking about keeping him. I don't think it's going to happen, because I was looking at his numbers. I think he's got a lot of strikeouts this spring. And I don't see why you would rush somebody when you got Abreu. And they're talking about him, maybe DHing or playing the outfield. But, keep an eye on him, because if they're talking about him coming up quick, then, maybe he'll go blow through the minors quick, and then, before you know it, he'll be here. So, but keep an eye on him, because it's a good stick. Now, again, I don't understand why I do understand why they're doing it, because it's, I guess they feel like they traded for Bowers. They traded Diaz for Bowers. Diaz is a good bat. And then when they got Bowers, then I think they traded somebody else. I don't know if they traded Santana. They brought somebody else in. I forgot the situation, who was the first baseman, but he got bumped. and then they were playing him in the outfield, and then he wound up getting bumped in the outfield. But he kept his mouth shut, and he went around. He's like the type of player that Francona likes. And when Francona talks about him, I got the feeling that Francona really likes him, and the team likes him. They like that he could play two positions. They like his lefty swing. They like he's 25. They feel, he's on the upswing. He's having a poor spring, and he's out of options. Like I said, Francona likes him. His minor league average was 270s. I don't think that's going to translate to the majors. I'm thinking 250, best case scenario. 20 home runs. He's got a 1-to-1, K to walk ratio. And, he didn't play in 2020. They traded for him. And, I gave him a generous 240 with 12, 38, and 32. And the only reason why I have those numbers lower than the books is because I think Bradley is going to supplant him, eventually. Now, does Bowers get a job in the outfield? Don't know. He has 20-plus power, so keep an eye on him. I wouldn't go with him as a starter. If you can grab Bradley and keep him like on your bench or your keeper mode, those 3 spots like we have, if you have something like that, I would do that. He's having a great spring. He's got 147 home runs in the minors. He's ready. He strikes out a lot. So, with him, I want you to look at the two of them. If you look at his exit velocity is 92.8, and then if you look at, Bowers, it's only 88. So Bowers is less than the average. So, I'm high on Bradley and lefty bat, man. So if you can get him, the guys are probably going to, even if he gets sent down, they're still going to pay for him because they know he's coming. So I would say if he gets sent down to the minors, he's probably going to go for $20 or $25 if he's not starting the season. Unless somebody doesn't know, and that happens, that he got sent down and they bid for him as if he's a starter, and they base it on, the 33 homers, 70, the minor league numbers, which, again, if this is going to be his first year, and if let's say they bring him up and maybe he splits time at first base. Like I said, that's why I got him a little bit lower with the 240, the 20, 65, 55. Now, there definitely is the possibility he's going to hit 30 right off the bat. And he's a big boy, so definitely, keep an eye on him. Then they have a kid called Connor Maribel. He had a nice college career, but he has no power in the majors. And when I say by the majors, he's been in the minors for 5 years. I consider that majors compared to the college, and he's only got 36 home runs in 5 years. So, he got good, the scouts, talked him up. I guess he plays great defense, but there's no translation in fantasy yet. So keep an eye on him as a prospect. Again, that's a future pick. Then everybody likes Josh Naylor in the books and stuff. You'll see, I was generous. I said 250, 11, and 40 only because he's having a poor spring. And because the situation, I think he's younger, and they're going to go with Bradley and Bowers, so I don't think he's going to get playing time. Now, he does play the outfield as well as first base, and the interesting thing with him, again, if you look at exit velocity, he's up there 90.3, and then I'm just going to lower this because you can see, and his average, because he did have a cup of coffee where he's a little bit less, is 89.1. So, again, interesting stuff over there. Now, this is a really interesting team in the sense that they probably got 3 guys that qualify as first baseman, and all 3 of them are going to play. So you're going to say, that's crazy. So they may not play. You're going to say, like, some of them have potential to hit 30 home runs. They may not hit 30 home runs. They may hit 30 home runs. It all depends on how much time they get. But between the 3 of them, they're going to all play. So if we look at Candelario first, he plays third and first. Then they picked up Renato Nunez from Baltimore. He got cut from Baltimore. They didn't want to pay him, so they got rid of him. I don't know why. The guy's got, if we look at 2019, he had bat speed of 90.7, and they're raving reviews about him. So he plays 3 positions. I think he's going to get the bulk of the starting time there. And, Candelario is a switch hitter. But I think what's going to happen is that those guys are going to split time. I don't think you're going to see 30. The books are saying 30. But I think because the 3 of them are going to split DH, first base, third base, and outfield, I think you're going to see those numbers come down a little, which is not bad. But I just think, if you're going to look at them, I wouldn't grab one of them as a starter. I would look at them more as, a bench player for later. If they're around, because somebody may take a chance on one of them. But you can see they're both pretty much the same. They're going to give you 245. They're going to give you 20 home runs, 26. Now, the interesting thing is Cabrera, you could say he had a down year in 2020, but did he? And I want you to look at the numbers. As old as he is, think about this. His bat speed jumped up 3 miles an hour from 2019. And I know he had some injuries, in 2019. So could that be it? His career average is 93.1. So is he ready to reclaim his hitting role a little bit? What I mean, like 20 to 30 homers and like 270, let's say. And I have him down 260, 20, 71. But the better he plays, the more time he's going to get, and the less time the other two are going to get. So that's something to think about in in Detroit. So the other thing I wanted to show you is if we look at 2020, shortened season, 200 at bats, 10 home runs, 93 mile per hour exit speed, right? And you correlate that over a full season at 30 home runs, right? If he gets 600 at bats, right? And it's definitely 20 home runs, right? If you give him 400 at bats. So I think that he's not done. I don't think he's washed up. I think you're going to see a resurgence. He wants to play the field. He's fighting the DH with them, and we're going to see. I got an article coming up. And then they also have Nico Goodrum. He's a switch hitter. He plays a bunch of positions: shortstop, outfield, second base, and first base. Keep an eye on this kid because he can steal. So if you have a first baseman that can steal, that's always a plus. I think he's going to be 230, 215, 53. And the reason why I do have projections there is because, let me just drop this down a little bit. Because I think he might get a shot at making the team, not necessarily as a first baseman, even though he is qualified to play first base, but you might see him play middle infield somewhere. And so you could see in 2019 he had 12 homers. In 2020 he had 5. His bat speed is around league average. But, again, role player, bench player, not a starter, but just somebody to keep note of because he does steal bases. And so if we look at this, excuse me, so we got a couple of things. The big man wants to play. Cabrera was never great in the field, but he is aiming to play first base more in 2021. And Hinch agreed with him, and I've been watching him. They've been playing him anywhere from, 2 to 3 times a week at first base. So he wants to play. He doesn't like DHing. He still thinks he could play. And, he's the veteran there. He might get his way. If he gets his way, then the other two guys are going to share DH and maybe outfield, So, again, I think everything hinges on Cabrera. His playing time might take away from those other two. So be careful. And I just got the Renato Nunez could fit a role in the Tigers lineup for a few seasons. So they're high on the kid. They love his bat. They're going to fit him in there. He plays multiple positions. So keep Nunez in mind if you miss out on a first baseman, but definitely for a bench player. And then you got Harold Castro. If we look at his 2019 season, this is minor leagues. He had he had 5 home runs with 38 RBIs. But I think if you keep a look at him and just keep an eye on him because he could play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 positions. I think it was actually 6, but I don't think he qualified for pretty much every single position. Actually, I think I got the whole infield. I do. So it was the outfield. He pretty much plays in real life every position. I think it was like one. I think it was center field. He didn't have any games at, but So that's, in real life, it's good. It's a benefit. But also for this, it's good to keep an eye on in case he does make the team or if he comes up later. Role player. That's all I have him in there for. Now, Spencer Torkelson. All right. He went to ASU. He was the round 1, number 1 pick. But he's having a bad spring. And they sent him down to A-ball. Okay. I have his college career numbers. He had 337 in college with 54 home runs, 130 RBIs. And, so he's somebody to watch. He plays first base and outfield. He's a big kid, 6'1", 220. Let's see what happens. Let's see he makes that adjustment from, metal bat to wood bat. Let's, follow him. But, obviously they took him in the number 1 spot. So could be somebody to watch. I think they thought he was going to be a little better than he was because he struck out a lot in spring training. And, I guess a couple of the other prospects that went in the first round, some of the teams are talking about keeping them, on the roster, which I don't think they should do to any of those kids. I think they should send them down and give them some seasoning in the minors. But you might see him at the end of the year, so keep an eye on him. Watch his numbers throughout the year. Like I said, you got the snake draft and those 2 extra spots. He might be worth it to take him. And then we got, Houston has 4 guys that could play first. You obviously got the mainstay. You got Gurriel. Now, he's 36. The books are saying he's old. They didn't bring anybody else really in to take his spot. And, 2 years ago, he hit 31 homers. He didn't, obviously, 60-game short season. He didn't do good. But, again, a red flag. He went down a mile an hour, as mostly everybody did, right? But look at his balls, his batting average of balls in play, right? It was a little bit off too, right? Compared to, the year before. And if you look at his career, it was a little off. So I think age is a factor. I don't think, he has 90.1 and 90.2, career exit velocity. So I think he's still in the realm where I think he's going to hit. He might not see 300, but I think he's going to give you 275, 25, 90, and 75. I think he's ready to bounce back from last year and pick up where he left off the year before. So, definitely, first, third, and second. So it's definitely a main guy I would target if you miss out on the big guys. Then they have Taylor Jones. Basically, somebody to keep an eye on. He's 25 plus power, 280s. He's that, 2 Ks to 1 walk ratio. Pretty much everybody is. He had a 91.9 exit velocity. So you might see him this year. In the minors at AAA last year, he hit 22 homers. So I got him 248 and 28 because, younger guy may come up towards the end of the year. And then Aldemis Diaz. Always keep an eye on him because he plays multiple positions. He's good to have on your bench. You guys know him from the Cardinals days. I was going to say San Diego. I meant to say St. Louis days where he had that, it's like legend. He had that 1 week where he hit like 6 home runs. A guy I played against beat me. He had him. I didn't have him. But he had like 6 home runs and like 15 RBIs. And the guy actually had started him that week. His shortstop was hurt. So he goes on those streaks. So if you're head-to-head and he's out there, you may want to monitor what's going on with him, or you may want him on your bench. So, again, the numbers aren't flashy at 255, 12, and 40. But if you pick him up at the right time when somebody's hurt and he puts up 3 home runs, 4 home runs in a head-to-head, that can definitely sway things your way, especially if you weren't expecting anything. And then they got, Abraham Toro's been there. He plays third and first. He got a couple cups of coffee the last couple of years. He's 20-plus power. He hits in the 250s. Is a little bit down on the exit velocity. But, again, someone to keep a look at. Now, Kansas City has 5 candidates for first base. Obviously, we got Santana. Again, my rules, he wouldn't be qualified for catcher. Just because it says he's a catcher doesn't mean, he's got to put the games in most of the head-to-head leagues. And basically, the last 2 years, he's only played first base. So you lose that with him. Now, he has excellent exit velocity. Last year, 92.5. Everybody else went down. He went up. And actually, I'm sorry, that was 2019, not 2020. 2020, it was down. But the point is, in 2019, he had 34. Look at the year. It was almost like a career year. 281, 34, 93. So you see how the exit velocity correlates? And then if you look at some of the other years where his exit velocity was off a little, it's not the same. So I think exit velocity is very, very good stat to use. Again, with all stats. And, there might be times you got to kind of not just go by that. But I think he's good for a 250, 24, 77. And the only reason why I got him at that is at 34, I cut him down a little. I think maybe 140 games, especially we don't know what's happening with the catching. But, they also have O'Hearn. Looks like he's going to make the roster too. And, maybe they'll give him, 20 games at first. So will he get to 30? It is possible. I have him a little less on the projections. I think they had him like 28, 30 in the books. But, I take into account everything. And then if we talk about O'Hearn actually, I don't want to call him a bust, but he hit like 195, in 2019. But he had 14 homers. But if we look at his exit velocity, it should be a 90. I have 9.0. It should be, sorry about that. So in 2020, he had 90. In 2019, he had 91.4. His average is, 91.2. So definitely a bat to watch. He's probably going to be on the roster. So I'm not saying as a starting first baseman, but, and I think they put him in the outfield a few games too in spring training. So don't know if that's going to carry over. And then he gets, outfield qualification. But I think they're definitely looking at him as, spell Santana at first and a DH, a lefty DH. So, will he hit 20 homers? Quite possible. But somebody to keep in mind and watch for later rounds and as a bench player. Then they have McBroom. Now, in his minor career, he's hitting 280s, 2-to-1 ratio, and 20-plus, home runs. You could see I put up his 315 and 26 in 2019. In 2020, they gave him a little shot. He had 6 home runs. He had an 89 exit velocity, so he's right around a little bit higher than the average. Again, if he makes the roster, what kind of playing time is he going to get? But he's just somebody to watch if somebody gets hurt. And then they got Prado. I put Prado there, and I joke around. I said, is he the next Goldie? Because it seems like his power never translated into the majors. He's been down there now for a while, and he's like 15 plus power. Lucky to hit 15, and that's a generous. And you can see he hit 191. So that's not too good. He's 3-1 in his K to walk ratio. But the one good thing he's doing is stealing a lot of bases. So I don't know if that's going to, keep going or correlate, but somebody to keep a look at in the future. And then I put Hunter Dozier here because he qualifies at first, outfield, and third base. Personally, I never take him. I don't like him. I know guys love him because of his power. But if you look, he has a 3-1 K to walk ratio. And usually his average and his strikeouts, they'll just kill your team. So, he generously 249, 19, 58, 64. He has decent bat speed. I have it in red there because you could see it was 91.8 in 2019, and then it was 86 last year. So is that like everybody else? They went down a little. He went down quite a bit, 3 miles an hour. Was he hurt? So what's going on? So keep an eye on with him. I know most people like him as a third baseman, So, but again, I only have him there more for a bench player. So if you miss out, you got him, and he can play multiple positions. Then we got, interesting thing going on in with the Angels. Pujols, obviously, he's on the decline, but 2 years ago, he still hit 20 homers, right? And his bat speed is the average, right? He is, 41, and think about that. He's still hitting 20 home runs, right? I know last year he was off, but you got to throw the 60 games out. So his career average in exit velocity is 90.6. I don't think you're going to see that anymore. But I think he's going to hit 20 homers. What I like about him is, if you look, he never strikes out 100 times. I don't think he's ever struck out 100 times in the major leagues. And he's always like 63 strikeouts, 57 walks. He's got a great, ratio. So I think that translates into, better at bats. And I think at his age, I think he could fool you. He could still put the bat on the ball. And I'm thinking 255, 2170, because they're stuck with him with his contract. They're going to play him. And then the young guy coming up is Jared Walsh. He also pitches. He moonlights as a reliever. He's a big lefty. He's 27. He's right into that breakout year. And he plays first base, outfield. He's got fantastic exit velocity at 91 miles plus. In 2019 in the minors, he had 37 home runs. Actually, one of those home runs, he had a call-up. He had like 30 at-bats in the majors. So I threw it in there. He had 37 total, and it's really 36 in the minors. So I gave him a generous 275, 20, and 65 only because I think Pujols is still there. He's not going to supplant them totally. I think they're going to split him between DH, first base, and outfield. And the interesting thing with him is if you had him last year, he hit 324 with the 9 home runs and the 26 RBIs, but he had 7 home runs and 17 RBIs in a 10-game stretch. So if you pick him up at the right time in a head-to-head, you can win a week just by his bat. So again, he's a bat to keep an eye on. I would probably draft him for the bench, and then see, if he's going to get, starting time or just, part-time role player time. Then you got Josh Rojas. He's not first base qualified yet, but in the spring he has been playing some first base there. So let's see if that carries over into the year. He's hitting 340 with 3 home runs and 8 RBIs. The interesting thing with him is over his minor league career, he has 71 stolen bases. So, and if we look at 2019 at AAA, he stole 33 bases. So again, he plays second, he plays short, outfield, and it looks like if, let's see, depending on your league rules, if he does qualify at first. That's why I threw him in here, because the stolen bases. And, just to remind you, when part of this is learning the players so that when we do get to the second baseman or the shortstops, you have that name in mind. And then a lot of people are high on Matt Thaiss. They sent him down. He's got 20-plus power over the last 4 years. He's shown that. Let me just go a little smaller so we can see all the numbers here. So, and he's 89.1. He's a little bit over the average exit velocity. How much time is he going to get when they do call him up? I got 274.14. Again, not a starting first baseman, but just somebody for your bench. Know that he plays all those positions, and you can see the difference in the American League between the National League is these guys play all these different positions. So it is pretty amazing. And then on the Twins side of things, they got 4 players. Alex Kirilloff came in as they wanted him to win the job. He's a big kid. He's a lefty. He plays outfield and first base, but he's having a terrible spring. And I think he played himself out of a job. I think they're going to send him down. If you look at 2018 at A-ball, he 348 and 20. 2019 at Double-A, 333, 13. I think they thought he was going to make the jump without Triple-A. I don't think that's going to happen. He back in 2016, he was a first-round pick, number 15. So he's definitely got the pedigree. He's probably going to be up here at some point. I just don't think it's going to be now. I think they're going to go with Sano at first. I think they moved him from third. And we'll see. He qualifies at first and third. He's 27. The thing about Sano, you cannot teach exit velocity. He's 95.2. He's got one of the highest. I know you're going to say he only hit 204, but he's at the 27 age. Last year, he hit 204 with 13 home runs in a short season, right? Year before, he had 34 home runs. He picked up the average a little because the year before that, he hit like 226. So I have him at 240, 35, 85, and 80. But I think he's poised to put up a career year. I'm not saying it's going to be this year, but in the next, 2 to 3 years, I think he's going to have a big year where he puts up 40 homers, maybe hits like 270, 40, 100, 120. So, if you did pick him as a starter, you just got to live with the fact that, like I told you in the first episode with the National League, if the guy hits 250 at first base, that's not going to destroy your average. It's when you start going under 250, but then if he's, going to hit 35 homers and drive in 100 runs, it's worth, risk reward, So he's having a poor spring, but, he's kind of like a veteran now, so that doesn't mean anything. So keep an eye on him. I would go for him if you're following the tiers and he's there and all the good guys are gone. I might put the money down on him, to be my starting first baseman. I like the bat speed, or exit velocity, and I like the fact that, he's in that time frame, and he was on the upswing and then until last year. So I think he's poised for breakout, big numbers. I think you're going to see 40 home runs eventually. We've been saying that for the last few years, so who knows? But let's see. And then you got Williams Astudillo. I put a question mark there for his projected numbers. Is he going to hit 270 with 10 home runs? It all depends on his playing time. He plays so many positions. I think he's got a role. He had 3 seasons, a cup of coffees. That's why you see they got the exit velocity, even though he was mostly in the minors. And you can see his minor league numbers. Nothing great, but he'll split seasons between the minors and the majors. His majors numbers are not great, but if you give him some time as catcher or something, could he hit 270? Maybe. Again, he's just a guy, a role player. Then they have Aaron Sabato, and those are his stats from North Carolina. He's a future pick. It's not for now. He's having a poor spring. Excuse me. In the 2020 draft we just had, he was first round, 27th. He was the 41 out of 100 prospects, predicted. So a good guy to keep a lookout for the future. He might be a few years away. Like I said, the spring showed that he probably wasn't ready. Some of the other guys that came out of college had good springs, and we're going to talk about a few of them. So, but decent numbers in college. Let's see the wood bat again. Let's see how it translates. So keep an eye on him. I would necessarily pick him now, but I would watch him over the next couple of years. I wouldn't waste a spot on him because I think he's going to take 2 or 3 years to get out of the minors. But I keep an eye on him. Then you got the Yankees. So you got Luke Voit. His interesting enough, his exit velocity has been trending down, even though you could see he's at the average, a little bit above the average, right? He hit 22 homers last year and won the home run title, right? And 52 RBI. So that translated in a full season, he was going to have 40 home runs, right? But then why'd they bring in Bruce? So they must know something we don't. He bats righty, right? He's a big kid, big boy, nice guy when you hear him interviewed, right? I got him at 265, 28, 85, right? I think Bruce is going to take some at-bats away from him, so you got Bruce there. And then totally, I would go in a different way. I think that if you look at the numbers that LeMahieu put up, and he qualifies for second, third, and first, if I missed out on the first basemen, and he was there, if I missed out, like let's say I got my depth chart, and I miss out on my first, 5 or 6 good first basemen, and then somebody throws him out as a second baseman, and I don't have a first baseman, I'll tell you what, I think I might spend and I have him a little higher in my tiers because I would spend the money and I would put him on my team as a first baseman because he's going to hit in the 300s, 315, 20 homers, 80 RBIs. If you look at most of those other first basemen, they don't come anywhere close to that, right? And look at his exit velocity, trending down from 2019. But like I said, everybody had a hit you give him that 1 mile an hour back and he's right back at the same, So for whatever reason, everybody seems that they went down a mile. Then I got Dietrich, he's a good bat with the power, as a role player, not as a starter, but he qualifies for many positions. And then I just wanted to say this, the Yankees are considering a risky move of they got to keep Tauchman. And they're thinking of sending Wade down and keeping Bruce. And then they would have like no infield role players, So who knows? But just to show you that they're talking about keeping Bruce. So those of you guys who are in love with Voit, just be careful. Because if they keep Bruce, they're going to give him at bats. And if Bruce, if the other guy's righty and Bruce is a lefty, and they like Bruce's power, they tried to get Bruce a few times. So I think that they're definitely going to give Bruce, some at bats, and that's going to take away from the other guy. I'm not saying that the other guy's going to go down tremendously, but you lose, 20 or 30 games, then you're not in that projection for 40 home runs anymore. And then do you spend the big money on Voit? If you're if you're just drafting in the snake draft, it's not a big deal. But if you're going head to head and you're paying for these guys, do you really want to get into a bidding war for a guy with the potential of 40 home runs, and now they're not gonna play him a full season? So there's a lot of things to think about when you go into your draft or your auction, So you got Mike Ford, great bat. He comes up and down. You could look at his numbers. 2019 in the majors, he had 12 homers. In the minors, he had 23. He had 259. You could see the difference. He had 300, batting average. So just keep a look out on him. He's like a 280 bat, 20 home runs. If somebody gets hurt, he's going to be the go-to guy at first base. And, listen, if they went to him and he put up those numbers, if he had 260 and 12, you had Voit breaks his arm, and you got to go get this kid. He could put up the same numbers as Voit. And what's great is his exit velocity is actually more than Voit. It's a shame that they don't have a spot for this kid. And he's not really a kid anymore because he's at 28. And the other thing is, the Yankees make moves. See if they trade him. I don't think they would because I think he's the backup at first. But just keep an eye on that. If he winds up somewhere else and gets a starting job, he's got great exit velocity and great numbers, great pedigree in the minors. I think, if he gets a full shot, like, Voit got a late start, age-wise. If somebody gave Ford a start, I think you're going to see the same thing. I think he's going to have the same kind of numbers. So keep an eye on Ford. Gittins is 27, a year younger, but he's a big kid. He's 6'4", 250. At Double-A last year, he had 23 homers, right? 260 averages, so keep an eye on him just for the future. As far as the A's, again, they got 5 guys that could play first. You got Olsen, fantastic numbers. He's probably, if in American League draft, he's in top 5, excellent exit velocity. Well, right now he's only got the one position. He might wind up playing some other positions. We'll see. I don't know if they're going to move him around or some of the other guys, because you got Kanha, who could play outfield and first base. Moreland used to play the outfield. The last couple of years, he didn't qualify as outfield. He hasn't played the outfield in a few years. Moreland's just there to show you he's really for bench purposes, because he might make the team as, DH off the bench, spell a guy here or there. But I would stay away from him. Then you got Seth Brown. Look at Seth's, minor league numbers. Let me just make this smaller. He's got not a great exit velocity, but he's having a poor spring, but 30-plus power. In AAA in 2019, he hit 37 home runs, right? So, and then he had a little call up there. He hit 293. So he had decent average. It kind of correlated in that short, stay there. He's outfield and first base. I got him here because he's probably going to make the team, I think, as an outfielder. But, if he qualifies at first and he starts playing, keep an eye on him, because him and Kanha is going to play in the outfield and DH. And, they have the potential of hitting 20 home runs. Kanha actually, hit 20 home runs in 2019. He had 26, So keep an eye on those guys. And then the last one is Schwindel. He's 28, so it's not really a prospect, but they got him in the minors. He's got 20-plus power at AAA. In 2019, he hit 24 homers. 2018, he hit 24. In 2019, he hit 16. And he strikes out less than 100 times a year. So check that out. Keep an eye on him for future picks. Seattle is they're high on Evan White. They pretty much he's a plus defender, and that doesn't do anything for you in fantasy. But I put that because they're so high on his defense that they said they'll live with the bat. They think the bat's going to come later. He's having a very poor spring. He's got great, numbers in the minors, 296, 20, 2-to-1 ratio. It just hasn't translated yet in the majors. He only hit 176, in a little cup of coffee there in 2020. But he had 91 exit velocity in his first year. So he's got the exit velocity. They love his swing. Reason why I throw the defender out there, it doesn't matter in fantasy, but if he's that good of a defender, they're going to play him. So even if he may slump a little, they're going to want him out there for his defense. So I think they're going to stick with him and give him the at-bats. They have a couple at-bats on the bench that we're going to talk about that can back him up, maybe cut some of his time down, because they are going to give these next two guys at-bats. They're both going to be on the team. So, but Evan White is pretty much, that's why I got him in like the pink. He's the starter, but there's always, he's 24. He's not really in that, breakout mode yet, and he only had one season, so it might be some growing pains. I'm saying 250-20 for him. It could go the other way. He could hit 270 and 30 home runs, but I don't think that's happening this year. And then you got Marmolages. He plays first base and outfield. They say he's going to be on the bench. He's going to be there. He's got pretty decent exit velocity. He's got 18 homers at AAA. He's got 6 last year. So off the bench, I'm not saying as a starter, but remember, he may cut into some of Evan White's time if you do go out and spend the money on White, and he's going to be a role player for you off the bench. And then they're very high on Ty France, but they already said that Ty France, I got the DH highlighted, plays multiple positions, but they already said he's going to be their primary DH. So, but if he qualifies for all those other positions, take a look at him. He's got fantastic numbers in the minors. He's hitting .417 with 5 home runs and 12 RBIs in spring training. Not that correlates or may correlate, but you got to look at that, and basically in parts of 4 years in the majors, he's only had 325 at bats. His average is 265. I know he hit 300 in the small sample size there in 2020. He's right around the average for his velocity. So good bat to look at. They're really high on him. I got 265-15. It could be more. Well, again, it all depends on his playing time. But if you really look at his numbers and you do the breakdown, and they're going to play him, he might be somebody to, you might have him higher on your charts than I have, or you may want him as a role player. So I definitely wouldn't take him as my starting first baseman, but I would look at him, backup. Then we got Sam Travis. This is a guy for the future. He's plays first base and outfield. I forgot his age. I think it's like 24. So he's got 89.6 exit velocity. It's going up. In the majors in 2019, he had a little call up. He hit 6 homers and then 215. But then he also that year he hit 7 home runs in the minors. So you got 13. I got 10 plus power because I don't think he's ever had more than 15. But again, 6 years in the minors, and they called him up like the last couple of years. Short stays, but that takes away from their minor league numbers, and then their major league numbers are like that, like 215, 6. So somebody to keep an eye on for the future, not so much now. Then you got the Rays. There's 6 of them. As you know, I told you, G-Man Choi, I would stay away from him totally because you're going to say, I got the age, before we found out he was hurt. He's 29. I figured he was going to have a breakout career year because 2019 he hit 19 home runs, 260. Last year, small sample size. He has the good exit velocity, but then his knee just got a cortisone shot. He's definitely not going to be ready, for opening day. That can linger. I would just, that's one. I don't want to invest money in somebody that, may get hurt. And then why would you invest money in 250-20 unless you had to, unless there was nothing else out there? But, there's better options. I think Brosseau has great pedigree in the minors. So I was a little bit higher. I put 275-20, 65 because I think he's going to get the job. He plays 4 positions. They like him. He's been there. In 2020, he had 90.9 exit velocity. It was up from 2019 by quite a lot, almost 4 points, right? 4 miles per hour, I should say, not points. And then if we look at his 2019, 273.6, 302.5 in 2020. Then you look at his minor league numbers. He's hitting 308 with 3 homers and 6 RBIs. So he's going to get the nod, over Choi because Choi's hurt. but I think that that's a good bat. Now, I have 275, 20, 65. I think he's capable of doing more than that. I just don't think they're going to, give him the full time. I think Choi's going to be back, and Choi's their guy. And I think Yandy Diaz is going to take away some of his at bats because they traded again that deal we talked about earlier for Bowers. They like Diaz's bat. I got him in green because he's on the roster. Basically, all those guys are on the roster. So, they may not all play first base, but they play multiple positions, and they're going to get time at first. They're going to get time at other positions. So they're good bats. Or, like I said, if you miss out on a first baseman and you're in a league like mine where there's not much left, you may want to grab a Diaz or a Tsutsugu and see what happens, right? Because he plays outfield, third base. And I got the first base in red because they switched him over to first base. He is going to be, they want him to play some first base and give Brosseau, spell him. Plus, he's the lefty bat. Bresseau's the righty bat. So I think you're going to see him get qualified as a first baseman once the season starts. And I think the interesting thing with him, he had a really bad year last year. I think it was the transition here. And but he had an exit velocity of 90.2. All their batters have exit velocity, first baseman, potential first baseman, have good exit velocity. I think they got 4 good prospects there. So keep an eye on them. You got, Rays, G-Man Choi expected to miss time. He just got the cortisone shot. That's big news, right? I think it actually says Brosseau, right? Here, start of the season, Diaz, Brosseau, and Suzuki could see more time at first base. So, again, I wouldn't draft one of their guys as my starting first baseman, but I would have one of those guys on the bench and then or just follow it and see who gets the job overall, wins the job outright. It's probably going to be Tsutsugu, right? Because they invested $12 million in him, and then they had to post another $2.4 million. So you say, well, $14 million is not a lot of money. But for Tampa Bay, that's a lot of money. They expected a lot more, than what they got. And if that guy's a bust again this year, I don't think they're bringing him back, right? He may have to go back to Japan because if he can't make the move here, I think that, he'll go back. But the interesting thing with that is it's a walk year. And we always know, maybe it took them a year to get used to being in America. And we always know when they're in a walk year, they, all of a sudden turn around and do great things, right? And look what they said. They're bragging about his impressive defense at first base, right? So he may turn into the starting first baseman, right? Lefty bat, right? So keep an eye on that. Right? He might get more of the at-bats. And then, they also have Dalton Kelly. I got him highlighted in green because he's got some good numbers. He scored 70 runs, but he steals bases. He's a lefty bat. He's a big kid. He's 26. He plays outfield and first base. His spring is not so good. He's got 5 years in the minors where he averaged 274, 15 plus in homers, 20 plus in steals. He had 76 stolen bases in 5 years. They're talking about him possibly making the team, not as a first baseman, but as an outfielder. So, again, he's got stolen base potential. That's why I have him highlighted. And then they have Tristan Gray, another one of those kids that got drafted high. He had a nice college career, 3 years in the minors. His spring training is 353, 2 and 5. They said he impressed them, but, they're loaded at first base. They're loaded at some of those other positions. He plays multiple positions. He needs more time. They're going to send him down. At AAA, he was 225-17. Again, he's somebody to look at for the future. Now, we got this mess going on, and I would stay away from the Texas first baseman. Again, Texas reminds me of Boston. Guzman and Lowe are exactly the same as the deal that's going on with Chavez and Dalbec. They both have decent exit velocity numbers. Their numbers are almost identical when you look at them, right? Guzman is hitting 313 with 3 home runs and 4 RBIs. He played winter ball in the DR. He almost won the MVP. They're saying he's playing the outfield now. He's got a different personality. He's hitting great. When you say 313, it's not great, but he's trying to win a job, right? So I think what's going to happen with him, I think he's got something to prove because they brought in Lowe and he's going to lose his job. So, again, with both of them, I split the numbers. Because if they split time, I got 247, 235, 13, 15. There is potential for much more with those two guys if one of them wins the job. So keep an eye on that. I would not, get involved with them. I'd keep them as role players if I was going to get involved with them. But I would more or less watch on the waiver wire if they're there and just see what happens. Because I'm not really sold on both of them. I would give the nod again. It's the same thing like Chavez. Guzman has more experience, and then if he played in winter ball and he did great, he's got the more confidence. So I keep an eye on him. And then to muddle everything up, you got Eli White. All of a sudden, they tell Eli White to grab a first baseman. He hasn't played first base since I don't know when. And then he starts, last 3 days playing, spring training games at first base. So you figure that out, right? He's hitting 276, 1-4, so it's nothing special. The only reason why I highlighted him, because if he does win the righty job and he does get some time at first, he steals bases. Right? Again, it's a position that doesn't necessarily get steals. So he's another one to keep involved in see what's going on. Then they got a legit prospect in Sheridan Apostle. He's 22, 251, 19, in 2019 at A-ball. Again, he's far from being here. Poor spring, first and third, but it's somebody to watch for the futures picks. And then here, they're sticking with Lowe. First baseman Nate Lowe went 2 for 3 with 3 RBI. So he finally broke out in a home run. Right, and it says his first base competition with Guzman. Manager Woodward has repeatedly said they know how good Lowe can be at the plate, but the results haven't shown up as the club expected until now. And this whole bunch, he goes on and raves about him. So they're sticking with the kid, and so what's going to happen to Guzman? So like I said, you got to watch that situation. And then here, Eli White, like I was telling you guys, White started at first base and went 0 for 4 in Sunday's spring game. Now, he's played the last couple of days at first base. So the Rangers are trying to find a role for White, who has hit well during Cactus League play. And, it says on there that the lefties are Nate and Guzman. So are they setting up a potential, platoon? Who knows? Keep an eye on that. I would personally stay away from it altogether. Now, in one of my mixed leagues, I'm going for Guerrero. I love Guerrero, so I'm going for Guerrero. I'm even higher than all the other first basemen. I want Guerrero. All right, I got him high here. I got him at 275, 30, 100, and 100. Now, that might be because I'm a little biased, but he also has 92.5 exit velocity. He hit 9 homers in the short season. He hit 15 in 2019. 2018, he was hurt. Missed some time in the minors. They flipped him over to first. He's fighting it. He wants to be a third baseman, so he's going to qualify for both. Then you got Tellez. He was a great bat too. He's a big kid at 6'4", 255. All right, he plays first base. I'm sure they're going to move him around. Maybe you'll see outfield there. I got him at 250, 20, which is, not really a far stretch. He's got a good pedigree in the minors. He hit good, in the short season. Again, look at his exit velocity, 91.2 in 2019. And like I said, everybody went down. Everybody across the board went down a mile in the short season. He went to 90.7. And then they got Tyler White, another guy named White. You got the other guy in this last slide with Texas. So he's 30 years old. He's been in the minors for 4 years. He's averaging 305 with 87 homers. Nothing impressive, but you never know. Somebody goes down. That's just a name for you to have. Okay, so now we did all that. Now I broke everything down. This part's going to be quick, and we're going to wrap it up. So basically, here's the tiers. Again, once I put the video up there, I'm going to add a link where you can actually print these out. You're going to say, well, your stuff is crazy. Well, I'm preparing for my draft and the way I'm building a team, and you got to understand that I had to put everybody in there because I'm trying to teach everybody all the stuff. But some of those guys are not available in my draft, so to do everything twice is a pain in the neck. So I kind of do it for everybody. But some of the things like DJ LeMahieu at 5 is really my number one that I'm going to go for in one of my leagues because I like I'm a different type of team. I'm going for spreading out the homers. I'm trying something different where I get a bunch of 20 home run guys, but that can hit for average and don't strike out as much. And I want to see what happens. Usually I get that big home run hitter. I'm trying something different with that team, this year. So again, that's part of the fun. You get to build your team any way you want, Ooh, I put 2 N's on Minnesota. I'm sorry about that. So, well, I know that Minnesota does have 2 N, but when they abbreviate it, it's M-I-N. I got M-I-M-N-N. So we'll get rid of one of those when I fix the slide so you can copy that. But basically, Abreu and Guerrero and Olsen, you could flip those any way you want. It's all preference. But those are the 3 in the American League that are going. I got Santana up there. Santana's a little higher for me because the 92.5 exit velocity. And I think he's poised. He's going to have a nice season. And then I got Voit. It was probably generous. I put him there. Like I said, I got 265, 28. I put him there mostly because of the power. I think he could go down a little. I got Mancini there. I think his numbers, again, I purposely made his numbers a little less in my mind because of the chemo stuff and the surgery. I just don't know how healthy he is. So those numbers could be, much higher, 35 homers like he hit 2 years ago. And then you could see, a little different than the books. And I do have Bradley in my top 15, which we know, that he's probably not going to start in the majors. And then I have Cabrera at 15. You're going to say, well, why do you have him there? I just personally feel part of this game is feeling, and you got to get lucky with stuff. And I just think he's going to have, I don't think he's going to be the Cabrera of old, but I think at 93.2 miles per hour exit velocity, I think the possibility for 30 home runs is there. And look at the crop. We don't have a lot in the American League. It's not like you have an Alonso there to hit 60, So I think that if Cabrera makes the jump up there, so you can go through that list. And then in my second half, you pretty much see everybody that's up there. You'll go through it. You'll figure it out yourself. This is how I break it down. I have all their positions when I bring, to the draft. I think it's a good way of doing things. I have the stat line, which they're projected at this point. I know everything. I know most of the players. I'm saying the way, not bragging, but the way studying wise and doing all this. And you should be the same way. You should be at the point that when you go to your draft, that's the projected numbers. But in your mind, you shouldn't have to grab the book and look through it really quick. You should already know. Pujols. There's a bunch of guys you should know by heart. And kind of their track record, so you don't get caught. But then as the draft winds down, there's always time to look through the books towards the end of the draft. In the beginning, there's not. You got to know that stuff. So I hope you enjoyed tonight, the American League second half. Again, I do have a sponsor, 3D Sports Cards. They're on eBay. Please check them out. And that's the end. So probably tomorrow night, the mixed league is going to be up. It's not going to be as detailed and as long as this. Obviously, I'm breaking down every single player and telling you all the ones that you could use at different positions. So the mixed league, it'll be very quick. It's just going to have really the charts, just like I showed you, and pretty much less than 5 minutes maybe. So if you want to just, if you kind of know your stuff and you just want the lists that I gave, and because most of the work is on there, and then you could just print them out. Like I said, I'm going to attach a link so you can print each of the things yourselves. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. Send some comments. I did have some questions about a couple of things. People sent me some emails about who they should draft and stuff like that. I don't mind talking to people. That's pretty cool. Just don't send. I had a couple of stupid things too, the cursing and stuff they put up there. So please don't send anything like that. I think it was automatically blocked. Nobody saw it, but there's no need for that. And like I said, if you don't like the way I pick somebody, I'm explaining to you why in my mind I'm building a team and how I'm building a team. We're all different. But maybe you learn something from me. I hope you take from this the work I put into it to do it. And, that's how I do my drafts. I try to win. If you're going to play, you play to win. That's how I am, right? And these guys win all the time, right? So, you carries over, I guess, competitiveness, So, I hope you take that with you. It's fine just to play, as if it's, you don't really know. Guys have come in and taken over teams over the years where they come in and they're not as motivated as most of us are into it. And then they get into it like 2 or 3 years. You'll see that they study and they make maps like this because you're not going to win unless you do stuff like this. Now, winning may not be important to you, but like I said, if you're putting up money, it costs money every year to do this, money and time. So, at least put a good effort into it, right? And then, you can also go, like I said, I've played some of the leagues in Vegas and stuff with the big money. You can do all kinds of stuff like that. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope everybody has a good night, and you'll probably hear from me tomorrow. Bye now.